when you watch the breakdowns, man, they're like half of it is CG, and then in some shots it's full CG. It is just disheartening, and goes to show that there is like this. Keep talking about this huge misunderstanding of how films are made today. Like people just don't know how films are made, and if anyone still thinks that a film like this doesn't have CG or VFX on every shot, they are their minds, because they have, like, it's thousands of shots.
It's an interesting thing with this film because it wasn't carried through. Promotional stuff does tend to have that practical vibe because it just does, right? Yep. Whoever's making these things. However, once the film was out and then in part of the visual effects Oscar race, there's actually a whole lot of coverage, including what I was able to do at Befores and Afters. But MPC has a great breakdown out. ILM has a great breakdown out. Blue Bolt has a great breakdown out.
Yeah.
Generally, it's resulted in a nomination, but also it's resulted in the public being more aware of the visual effects in the film, which is awesome. Good result, right, from our point of view.
This podcast is brought to you by Backlight. Backlight Creative enhances the entire creative project lifecycle. For pre-production, there's Celtics. For scriptwriting, beatboards, shot lists, and planning. And Backlight Gem, a narrative design platform for games and VR. For post-production, we've got F-Track Studio to manage creative projects with custom pipelines and reviews with CineSync and F-Track Review for high-res, real-time media collaboration. To manage your assets, connect your own storage to Iconic, a scalable cloud-based media asset management platform. You can learn more at backlight.co. And now on to the show.
Hi everyone, welcome to the VFX Notes podcast. I'm Ian Fales and I'm joined as always by Hugo Guerra from Hugo's Desk. Hi Hugo, how are you?
I'm good. Hi Ian. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Today everybody will be talking about Napoleon, Sir Ridley Scott's latest big, huge film. And before we get started into the podcast, of course, Hugo, we want to make sure to thank our viewers, our sponsors, and our Patreon supporters, without whom we wouldn't be able to do this at all, would we?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for supporting the show every month for years now. Can't believe we've been doing this for years now. And yeah, thank you so much. Without you, we would never be able to do it. And also thanks for all the love we get on the messages. Well, we get a lot of comments. We get a lot of messages privately as well about the show. It's great. It's really great. And I keep saying this lately. I one of the biggest requests I get from the audience is that they want to listen to the show in audio only, because we only publish on YouTube now. Never forget that YouTube does have a music app called called Google Music, and you can listen to this podcast there as audio if you want to, just like any other podcast. Which is good. Yeah.
On the other hand, I get people saying they want to see more of your film, DVD, and book collection, Hugo. So, people pause the screen and zoom in on what's in your background, as I understand it. So, anyway, of course, we're talking about Napoleon. It's a huge visual effects film. It's actually a really, really big, huge film that kind of came as a bit of a surprise to me in terms of the big films that got released late last year. We'll get to a discussion of the many different kind of practical and digital visual effects in the film. But first, we always start with a look at what we thought about the film. Now, I have a bit of an inkling about what Hugo thinks, so I think I should let him go first.
Oh, you sure?
Yes.
I'll be quick. I watched the film twice now, okay? And let me just say that it does not improve the second time. I think this film is probably, I want to sound controversial, but I think it's one of the worst films we've ever done on the show in terms of a film. I'm not talking about the VFX. I think the VFX is absolutely stunning, and we'll talk all about that in a second, and by far the best part of the film. I think this film is just like terrible. It's it's old-fashioned. It's like the pace is not there. The actors look bored as hell. I don't know what's happening with Joaquin Phoenix. Like, he looks like he's bored out of his mind doing this film. Like, it's just old-fashioned editing, old-fashioned. The music is terrible. Like, I don't know what happened. The way it's edited, it's so all over the place that it jumps from year to year to year. It almost doesn't have any context whatsoever. I just feel that the film just does a poor job showing Napoleon and showing. I think it tries to show too much, and then it doesn't show anything. There's too much here. This is definitely a film that shouldn't have been a film. It should have been a TV show. There's so much here to talk about. The story, the history of Napoleon is so huge, and to have to skip things like this is just weird. You know, there's multiple really famous battles that were skipped. You never really understand the reasons for what's happening, because you're not supposed to have a history degree to go and watch this movie. You're supposed to watch the movie and try to understand it. And I just feel that it tries too hard to have the relationship of Napoleon and Josephine as the heart of the movie, but then it also abandons that as well. You never really. There's just too many threads. They're never really resolved, and I just feel that I was watching a slog. I hated the movie, and the second time it was even worse. I thought that, how the hell was this even greenlit? I'm sorry. I think this is a terrible movie, and I should have been a TV show. I'll shut up now. You tell me, what do you think? Go for it.
Well, I think the bit that I agree with you there, Hugo, is what is the heart of the movie.
Yeah.
Now, other Ridley Scott films, say Gladiator, the heart of the movie ends up being the relationship between Russell Crowe's character and his dead family, right? Like, that's the emotional part of the film.
Yeah.
I can tell, watching Napoleon, they were counting on the audience being very, very invested in Napoleon and Josephine's relationship. And, maybe going from hating the way Napoleon treats her to understanding it and maybe feeling sorry for her, but also maybe, thinking Napoleon is a complex character. In the end, that relationship isn't very interesting, is how I would say about the movie.
Yeah.
I think the film just looks so good, has such incredible battles and other sequences, that as an audience member in the theatre, and I saw this on the big screen, it looked incredible, as I say, it sounded incredible. I just think in the end you get a bit invested in just wanting to see those things. And that's a sign that you're not really into the personal relationships.
Yeah.
So that didn't work. But, like someone would say to me, but that was their relationship. He treated her terribly and he treated all the women terribly, and he was this person that did that. And that's what they're showing. But I think, I felt watching the movie, Ridley was trying really hard to make it more emotional than it actually came off. So that was probably my gut reaction to the film, was like, I think they're trying to do something here and they haven't succeeded in doing that relationship thing.
Yeah.
But as a big Ridley Scott film, very excited to see it. Enjoyed that part of it.
I guess it's an excuse to do the battles. I understand that, and I understand that, as very famously you can see Ridley on interviews and on articles, he's heavily inspired by multiple paintings from the 18th century, and a lot of things some shots are really tableaus from those paintings, and they're like matched very closely to the painting. So I guess it's just an excuse to just do those scenes, but I just felt that the film is just not balanced, and the film is not well constructed in terms of a story. I just feel that it's all over the place. It tries to show too much, and in the heart of it, I really was much more interested. It would have been much more interesting if you would have shown a section, like in the past. There's like this famous film called Waterloo, which is a famous film that shows that's just that battle. I feel like they should have focused just on one section of his career. or maybe if they were really going to spawn from 30 years, it should have been in a different vein. And also, like, it's really strange, the whole thing, because Joaquin Phoenix looks the same the whole entire film, but we're supposed to watch this 30-year-old thing. When we first see Napoleon on the film, when he's like watching the decapitation of
Marie Antoinette.
Yeah, Marie Antoinette. When we see the decapitation of Marie Antoinette, he's supposed to be 24 or 25, and he does not look 24, 25. I feel like I think also that's a problem, because you just look at him, he just looks the same the whole time, and so you never really understand the time is passing, except the really tiny little titles, handwritten, that show up on the bottom, and then you realize, oh shit, 10 years have passed. Oh shit, 5 years have passed. Oh, yes. And you never notice that happened.
Yeah,
that together with all the political intrigue that just gets really skipped and badly explained, and you never really understand how he came to be and why did France supported him. You never really get it. Yeah.
Maybe history buffs would say they either did that well or not well. I'm not really sure. That aging thing does take you out of the movie a little bit, and I wonder whether they made a decision, like de-aging can be great, but it doesn't always work, and we can do this with makeup effects, and we can basically solve it by saying what year it is. I don't know if that totally took me out of the movie, but it was an interesting choice not to do it. I will say this, Hugo, the opening scene, or one of the opening bits where his horse gets cannonballed, and basically it's quite a disgusting scene. Really well executed by Neil Corbold's practical effects work and MPC. When I saw that, and I sort of saw how it Ridley made, Joaquin continue on, and that was to show his gusto, I thought, this is going to be a great movie. And it did set the scene for a good beginning, but it didn't continue. Like that nice opening, I really thought that was well done. I thought was really character building, but it just didn't quite keep going. That was the issue for me.
I know what you mean, because you never really get to see the really remarkable military strategy that he does. You never really notice it. You never really, because everything is just so fast-tracked. Fast-tracked,
Yes,
on that shot
I
you
agree.
see it.
So I agree with you, except that I feel like you've actually made the point that Ridley is almost trying to make, which is he wasn't that good a leader. There was some, aren't there end titles, little descriptions about what happens and all the basically people that died, and how unsuccessful he was, basically.
Yeah, if you chart the graph, you see it's just more and more people dying the whole time.
And so this is going to be so obvious to people who know about Napoleon and French history, but like I almost thought that was almost kind of the point. Like he sort of was this person in power, but he's crap.
I understand that. I understand that. But that's also like a very British perspective as well, I think, and I feel like that's the other elephant in the room that I have to say, that it really, really did not work for me. Why is the film spoken in English? I'm sorry, I have this problem that I always say. It might be because I'm European, I'm Portuguese, so I am used to other languages, and I just don't understand how a film about the most French person in the world is not in French. I'm sorry, Napoleon is French. The whole thing is French. It's all about France. It's all about the revolutions. It's all about Marie Antoinette, the decapitation. It's the most French thing. You're just missing the baguettes. Like, it's the most French thing you ever see in your life. And he's speaking American. Some people are speaking British. I just find it ridiculous. I just don't get it. It's not the 90s, guys. We don't need to do this. We don't need to do this. And it just pulls me off of the film because it looks ridiculous that they're talking. And there are so many really good French actors. You could have pulled this off in France. I mean, I just feel that really pulls me out of the film. And it makes it almost like sound like I'm watching a parody of Napoleon, or almost like a caricature or a comedy movie or something, because they just sound so stupid sometimes. I just, man, I hate the movie. I don't have to say that.
I think, yeah. And look, it didn't get great reviews in France, so
Well, yeah.
no surprise there. But I think again, it's kind of like one of the things about this film is Ridley Scott is one of those directors that you still say, I'm going to go and see a Ridley Scott film.
I know.
Even if it is just a character piece,
yeah.
Not a big battle special effects, visual effects thing. And there aren't, I mean, you and I think, Hugo, can pinpoint some directors we'll always go and watch, but not sort of necessarily the general public. And that is why a film like this gets greenlit. It's a Ridley Scott film.
Yeah.
And of course, the general public knows about Napoleon. And so, guess what? When I went into the cinema, which was pretty empty the day I saw it, I really enjoyed just leaving my brain at the door a little bit and watching a Ridley Scott film. But is it that I did that with probably Exodus and a few other films,
Yeah.
I think what I'm trying to say here is Ridley maybe is trying to say a lot with the film, but he didn't achieve it, and I didn't care because I kind of just enjoyed what happened on screen. And I did.
I understand what you mean.
I enjoyed the machinations, the Russian stuff and Josephine stuff a little bit, and I enjoyed like how awful he was. And Joaquin Phoenix is very powerful on screen. Like he just is, he just has something. Here he was clearly playing. He's playing a bit of a weirdo, right? Wasn't he?
Yeah.
Isn't that what he was trying to do? Like Napoleon's weird.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, famously, like Ridley Scott wanted to hire him. Well, they've done a film before, of course, Gladiator, but he wanted to hire him because he was so blown away by the performance in Joker, and he thought that would be the perfect person to do Napoleon because he's a weirdo on Joker as well. Ian, like I completely understand what you mean. Like I know that I'm guilty of this as well. I watch many movies that are considered terrible movies, and I leave my brain out the door. Let's just talk about all the Fast and Furious movies, which I've watched all of them, and I like them, but I shouldn't like them. They are terrible, and they are absolutely trash. But when I go and watch a Ridley Scott movie, or if I go and watch an historical representation of Napoleon, except if it's like Spaceballs, which is to joke about something, if it was like a comedy movie, this was supposed to be a serious movie, and I just felt that I couldn't leave my brain out the door because it's supposedly it's a historic representation of a figure that existed. It's supposed to be grounded in history, and the funniest thing of all of this is that the film is really inaccurate, and it has a lot of mistakes and a lot of problems and a lot of liberties that were done in this story. That's why maybe people will misunderstand when I said the film sounded old-fashioned. The film doesn't look old-fashioned. The film looks amazing. The film looks just like a modern film, and it looks stunning, and the VFX look absolutely amazing, and it's well-deserved the nomination that it has for the Oscars, and the nomination for costume design and production design as well. Those three nominations are bang on. It's one of the best-looking films of the year. The reason I say it's old-fashioned is because it's made on an old-fashioned way, where you skip and do caricatures of what happened in history. You make it in English. You just make these things that we used to find normal on the 90s and the 80s. And I mean, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but maybe it's starting to show the age. Ridley Scott is 82 years old. He is a bit old. Maybe he's not really into the new things, for sure. I mean, I don't know. Like I'm very disappointed by the film, but I've been disappointed by his work for a while now, and I think he has not done an amazing movie in a while now. If you really start thinking about it, but you can't say anything because he has done some of the best movies in the world. So he's already done his part. He didn't need to do any more films,
Well, he's still gonna. He's still
I know.
keep making
He's
them.
doing Gladiator 2, which I don't even know why this is being made. Oh my God. Why is that film being made? But that's fine. Like, it's like you said, it's Ridley Scott. Like, of course they're going to give him a check. Of course they're going to, and the film was successful. I think the film kind of like didn't do amazing in the box office, but that I think has to do with the fact that it's on a streaming app and it will always be good there and big there. It's an Apple TV movie, so it's always going to give a lot of numbers there. I'm sure it's going to live a long, long life on Apple TV watched by millions and millions of people.
I think people will really pick it up on Apple TV when it gets released. I do think that. The thing that the film struggles with is that it clearly was... It's Napoleon. It's the Battle of Waterloo. It's all the battles. It's on paper, like, oh my God, how good is that going to be in the cinema? But you could just tell that the writers and Ridley, they want it to be a character study.
Yeah.
And something about it, even despite great acting, from Joaquin and Vanessa Kirby and others, it is good acting, actually. But despite that, you don't take away the character study.
No.
Right?
It's a difficult story to play out because it's so complex. And man, many people have tried and failed. I think this is a failure again. Man, the most famous failure of all times is Stanley Kubrick tried to do this for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And he never managed to finish the film. Like he went into pre-production. He has storyboards, even has photos. There's an entire Taschen book about it. Like it went quite far. There's a script and everything, but he kind of gave up because it was going to be too complicated, too expensive, too long. It was probably going to be a 5-hour movie, which Ridley Scott also had a really long cut in the beginning, a really long cut. And there is supposedly a 4 or 5 hour long cut of this movie, which maybe it will be released someday. Maybe
but isn't there always? I mean, there always is.
I know. But I actually think this one needed one. Because this film needed another hour to do all those things. Yeah. And I know that's going to be long, 3 hours and a half, 4 hours. But that's why it could have been, especially it's Apple TV, it could have been a 3-episode thing, like a 3-episode or a 4. Man, the BBC has been doing seasons with 3 episodes for years now. They call it a season. Look at Sherlock Holmes. There's one of the seasons is like 3 episodes of an hour long or an hour and a half. So you can definitely do that. I don't think it needed to be a movie, but I guess the Oscar race is nice there, and they want to go for it. So
yeah. Look, it's a big Ridley Scott film. I enjoyed seeing that for that reason, and it didn't hit the marks on the things that How can you not compare this to Gladiator or some of the other big films that Ridley's done that have big battles, Kingdom of Heaven, and a few others. But I enjoyed it for the spectacle.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes all I want. So congratulations to everyone who made the spectacle possible. We don't usually do this, Hugo, but to get into the visual effects straight away is something I'd like to do for this reason.
Yep.
It also relates to Ridley and how the film was pushed by Sony and then Apple.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this so often on the VFX Notes podcast, but because it's a film that's huge battles and, is coming out at a time when the marketing of these films seems to be, let's not talk too much about the visual effects or the CGI. This film did sort of have that brief Oppenheimer, Barbie, no CGI problem with it, didn't it? It probably not as in the scale as Oppenheimer and Barbie, and Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, but it did have that issue, didn't it, when it was getting promoted?
It did, yeah, it did. Famously, there's like this interview that Ridley Scott has for this YouTube channel called History something. I can't remember the name. It's a really big YouTube channel. They usually have millions of views on their videos, and they are mostly a YouTube channel that I'll put it on the description, but there's mostly a YouTube channel that talks about historical films and historical representations in multiple medias. And the thing with this is that the thumbnail of that video says we didn't want to do any CGI on this film, and the thumbnail is it's taken out of context for sure. I think Ridley Scott has been using CGI from the beginning, CGI and VFX and FX. I mean, look at Blade Runner, look at Gladiator, look at Alien, all of the films he's done. So he's no stranger to that, and I think it's really words taken out of context. It's really hard to see. I even made jokes about that interview. I even made a video about that interview, about how he says it's all real, it's all real.
What we're looking at here is not CGI.
No, it's all real.
But we live in a world now where everyone's talking about AI and doing everything fake. I mean,
Well,
do you think your career will mark the golden age of massive films?
I think you feel when it's fake, when it's AI, you know it's somehow artificial. All of this is real shooting. We shot this in Malta, which I've been there. Malta, in a funny kind of way, is an architectural gem. Really, architecture is medieval, Renaissance. It's stunning. Medina is incredible. It's all real. I think you feel when it's fake, you know it's somehow artificial. All of this is real. It's all real. I think you feel when it's fake, you know it's somehow artificial. All of this is real. It's all real. It's all real. I think you feel when it's fake, you know it's somehow artificial. All of this is real. It's all real. I think you feel when it's fake, you know it's somehow artificial. All of this is real. It's all real. It's all real. All of this is real.
And they really push the all real narrative, not only on that interview, but also on the Sony's featurettes. And I understand why they tried to do that, because they did go and shoot something. They did shoot something. And
Yes.
they did shoot a lot of it physically. But I really think that Ridley was talking about AI. He was not talking about CG. So if you really look closely to that interview, he mumbles quite a lot. He talks quite to the inside. He's like mumbling quite a lot. And if you really slow it down and really listen to it, the interviewer is asking him, is this AI? And he says, no, it's all real. I think he's talking about AI because there's a brief moment that he just says, this is all real CG. And it's all a matter of wording. And, I think that's the problem as well. I think Ridley Scott probably doesn't know the correct words to talk about this. And it probably wasn't checked by everyone. And I really don't believe that Ridley would put the VFX industry under the bus like that. I don't think so.
No.
And I think it's just out of context. And maybe it could be the shot he was actually talking about at that moment didn't had a lot of CG. Maybe that shot didn't. And
Yeah.
these things are really difficult. Journalism, well, these so-called journalists sometimes, as we know, and we talk about this on the podcast all the time, it does get out of context all the time, so...
It does, from single comments that actors or filmmakers make. I also think sometimes certain publications feel like that's a fun angle to say, oh, you did it for real, the no CGI. But definitely the promotion of the film at first was about going out with 14 cameras, if not more, and soldiers. I mean, it always is with a battle film. No matter how much digital army stuff is in any film, they love talking about the costumes and the actual stunts and battles, as they should, by the way, because it's incredible, and we'll get to all that. Why I wanted to bring it up early was it came in the context of other discussions happening in the visual effects industry. And of course, we didn't mention this up front, but the film is nominated for Best Visual Effects at the Academy Awards.
Yeah.
And, there are other interviews Ridley did during the promotional campaign where he actually mentioned his CGI guy, Charlie Henley, who's the production VFX soup from MPC.
Yeah.
And, and they had the super close working relationship. Yeah. Charlie is probably one of the first persons on the show, on the film, So no one really thinks anymore, I think, after this long discussion we've had for the past couple of months, that the filmmakers don't respect or deal with VFX. It's just a huge part of the production. The issue for me has become the promotion.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah, the marketing.
That's my big
departments,
issue.
And and the way, we're not stranger to Sony doing this. Sony did the same with Gran Turismo as well, and so they are starting to kind of getting used to this. It all comes down to that kind of CGI is a dirty word right now, unfortunately, and and there's like this push that it will, if people think there's CGI, they won't go and see it because there's like this stink that CGI has, which is all self-made. Like it is all self-made by these publications and these really weird websites and these really notorious clickbaiting accounts. I'm not even going to call them journalists. They're not journalists. They're just like clickbaiters or something. I don't know. And I feel like it all kind of gets driven by that. And of course, I'm not saying, there's a lot of producers that do that as well. And a lot of directors have brought the CG under the bus. I mean, notably just last year, Michael Bay did that with Ambulance. But so directors sometimes do it as well. But I really kind of doubt that Ridley Scott would have done that on that kind of sense. But, I do think these things kind of go out of control because, like you said, the VFX supervisor, yes, long-term collaborator. The same with the DOP, they've been doing films. Dariusz Wolski has been doing films with Ridley Scott for decades now. I mean, they did Prometheus together. They did Alien. They did The Martian. I mean, all these films have more VFX than everything else. But it is disheartening. It is disheartening because you see this push of practical. You see all these featurettes, and we keep talking about this on the show. They are always done during the production, so there's no CG at the time, and it kind of makes it look like it was all shot for real. And then when you watch the breakdowns, man, they're like half of it is CG, and then in some shots it's full CG. It is just disheartening, and goes to show that there is like this, keep talking about this huge misunderstanding of how films are made today. Like people just don't know how films are made. And if anyone still thinks that a film like this doesn't have CG or VFX on every shot, they are their minds, because they have. Like, it's thousands of shots. So it's frustrating, this narrative. It's really frustrating, and it just doesn't help anyone, I think.
Yes. And it's an interesting thing with this film because it wasn't carried through. Promotional stuff does tend to have that practical vibe because it just does, right? Yep. Whoever's making these things. However, once the film was out and then in part of the visual effects Oscar race, there's actually a whole lot of coverage, including what I was able to do at Befores and Afters. But MPC has a great breakdown out. ILM has a great breakdown out. Blue Bolt has a great breakdown out.
Yeah.
And generally, the film is nominated for... generally, it's resulted in a nomination, but also it's resulted in the public being more aware of the visual effects in the film, which is awesome. Good result, right? From our point of view.
I'm so happy that you mentioned this. This was on my notes, and I really wanted to mention this real quick. It's one of the first times ever that I've seen that all the breakdowns match up with the breakdowns of the Visual Effects Society. Like, if you watch the Visual Effects Society nominees, because we as VFX members, we have access to usually more breakdowns than the general public. Most of the breakdowns there are the same ones that are on the public. I think it is really interesting how this film shows everything. And man, the ILM's reel is 5 minutes long. How many times do you watch these kind of things lately? Like, we never get 5-minute long reels of VFX. I definitely think it has to do with the fact that is probably why it got nominated, because of the sheer amount of things that you can actually notice. And I wanted to mention this because we haven't done that episode yet. We haven't done Barbie yet, but I really want to do. I really strongly believe that is why Barbie wasn't nominated and why Oppenheimer wasn't nominated. And I think that's also why Mission Impossible will not win. I feel like these films are really damaging themselves. These marketing departments and this push of practical is damaging their chances of getting awards. I feel like it is really that. Barbie, in that case, I've seen enough breakdowns to believe, I've seen them, the private ones in the Visual Effects Society, I've seen enough to think that it would have been nominated if people would have fucking seen it. But they didn't see it. They didn't show it. And in this case, Napoleon just put everything out, and it got nominated. This really comes to show that this is the correct way to promote a film. This is the way. You don't say anything before it comes out. You show it so it's a big surprise. Once it's out, who cares? Show everything. Try to get all the awards. I think this is the way to do it. This is how it all of them should be done, you know.
Yeah. I think you're right, Hugo. In the case of Oppenheimer and Barbie, it's my opinion that it's a bit of a message to the filmmakers.
Yeah.
To say, hey, stop, talking down VFX.
Yeah.
Because clearly the work is amazing. And
Yeah,
we've seen behind the scenes many times in different ways. I've been privy to it partly from the View conference and VS voting and just talking to the actual supervisors.
Yeah.
The challenge that they have with things like Oscar nominations is that I think they're also making sure that we're talking about a film where visual effects is a huge part of the production.
Yeah.
And Napoleon, it's huge. Now, Oppenheimer, the challenge there is it's only 200 visual effects shots.
Yeah.
Barbie is a harder one to, describe because it's pretty much every shot in the film.
Yeah.
And it might not be the most complex work. But of course, I feel like Warner Brothers were hiding the amount of work done because they wanted to push the production design, which rightly so is incredible, and push the practical. So these levers that are on how much do you push the filmmaker versus, acknowledging all the other work that goes on. I think they've been doing that for so many years now, and it's just only this past year that the VFX industry is kind of fighting back.
Yeah.
So it'll be
Not
curious
enough
to
in
see
my
what
view.
happens.
Not enough in my view. I feel like more people should fight it because I still get a lot of comments from people on the industry saying, "Oh, but isn't supposed to be invisible? We're not supposed to talk about our work." It's just a ridiculous stand that people are letting people like stepping all over us like this, and I feel like it's just not going to end well. It's not going to end well for our prospects of work. It's not going to end well for companies. They're going to be like shut out of business because they will be pressured to bid lower. And it's not good that we do this. And I feel like testament to Napoleon, I know I was very hard on the film, but I was only hard on the film itself. From the visual effects point of view, I feel the film is stunning, and also it did it really correctly. It showed everything that it had to show. It has a great chance of winning the Oscar, I think, because this is the kind of film showing so much, and it has the baggage of Ridley Scott. It has the baggage of Gladiator. Dune didn't come out, so it doesn't have a lot of competition. If you think about it, I know Creator is a big competitor, but I have a feeling it's going to win. I have this feeling that it might win because there's so much out there. Unless the other ones come close and start showing things. But, we haven't seen anything from the other ones. So not much has come out. Creator hasn't shown hardly anything. Mission Impossible has some stuff, but some stuff is hidden as well, which is a bit weird. Especially it's hidden in a really weird way. It's on the thumbnail, but it's not on the breakdown, and it's just really bizarre stuff happening there. But then also I don't even know what Disney is waiting for on the Creator. There's so much breakdowns, and they don't show it. It could take the cake, man. It could, and I will find it fascinating if it does, because it will be probably not the one that everyone was expecting to win, but it could definitely win. But yeah, let's start talking about it. Let's start talking about the VFX.
Absolutely. Well, the one I'd love to start with is that horse shot, which is, like you're watching the film and you don't expect this graphic, gruesome thing to happen. I mean, I guess you do. It's lots of battles and stuff. But I just really loved how this was achieved. I wrote about it in an article with the overall visual effects supervisor, Charlie Henley, where he described how it was a Neil Corbold, animatronic horse setup to film this gag of the cannonball going into the horse's chest, and then essentially it's an NPC takeover. I just think that there was something about this way that this shot was staged, which is right in your face, that really worked as a shot design. But then there was also something about however they married the practical with the digital. And unfortunately, this isn't a shot that we get in many breakdowns, Hugo, because I think it might be a bit too graphic. But I just think it really worked. And as I keep saying, I'm really enamored by this shot, right? Especially because I thought it was building character for Napoleon. But what did you think about this sequence?
I did see a breakdown of it on the Visual Effects Society judging thing.
Oh, right. Cool.
Yeah, there's a breakdown of that shot, although I know what you mean. I do think it might be a bit too much for YouTube and a bit too much for most platforms, because it is really gruesome, the breakdown I saw. And yeah, like you said, it's a combination of practical with a lot of VFX attached on it. Yeah, it's brutal. Like, you're not expecting it at all. It's just right at the beginning of the film as well. And you're like it's like a slap in the face when you watch it. And I really get what Ridley was trying to show there, like trying to show the brutal nature of war, especially this kind of warfare, which is really cannon fodder, almost. Like everything is cannon fodder on this film. There's so much gore on the film. There's so many people dying all the time, and horses being trampled and exploded, and especially on the ice sections. But yeah, it's very well made. It's a bit too much on your face, though. It might be a bit too much, but at least it was for me. But yeah, it's really well achieved.
Yeah. That horse shot happens amidst an opening battle, which was an important battle for Napoleon to be witness of and part of, and show his leadership skills. But it's curious, it's also a time when you really see a lot of visual effects there that feel real. Now, here's us talking about visual effects being practical. But actually, that was also a really great, to me, stunning opening of the film, where I was not 100% sure until I covered the work whether they actually had got real boats, sailed them into Malta Harbour, filmed things. And of course, they haven't done that. They've been able to utilize stand-in boats. Then they've built CG ones, and mostly Blue Bolt VFX was responsible for the sailing stuff. But I'm just sort of mentioning that, Hugo, because there was... It is a superpower Ridley has of possibly building up these scenes where you're like, well, I mean, he is kind of this director that probably could get all these ships in one go, But of course, it's testament to the visual effects people.
It is, I really recommend people watching. I'll put it playing while we're talking. Blue Bolt's showreel is amazing. And it really shows like a very grounded piece of work, because there are hundreds of stuntmen walking around and exploding and fighting, and there's a bunch of things happening on the shots. But also, if you really look closely, and again, I feel like breakdowns sometimes don't really do a good service trying to show to the audience. It's a bit too fast, this breakdown. And so if you really note closely, if you start pausing on the breakdown, there's an enormous amount of blue screen behind the soldiers and behind with all the set extensions. So you have like an amazing piece of work here with all the set extensions behind the soldiers. Then you have augmentations on explosions, augmentations on bullet hits, augmentations on explosions of the cannon, also extensions of the towers and the walls as well, because the Malta buildings were not really that one, it was other buildings. And on top of that, you have this amazing work done with, they had one practical ship, just one. And then after that, they basically built 100 other CG ships. And it's really cool how they made the fires. They had this real ship there with LED lighting. And then they actually shot miniatures of the tops of the ships with real fire so they could composite. And of course, it's a mix. There's some compositing there. And of course, there's some CG fire as well, mixed all on there. But it's a really clever way of doing it, because they had these like I think it was like 1/4 scale or 1/5 scale sails, basically just the top sections of the ships, and they burned them over I believe a blue screen, and then just build that over on top of the other ships that were on the, and of course there's like full CG shots as well. But this is a really great start, and it really shows you how invisible the VFX is on this film. It's really invisible, you know.
And I'm going to add to that it's also the kind of thing that the Academy voters love, seeing miniatures, right? And they're not full miniatures of the ships. I think these are rigging miniatures made by Magic Camera Company, and who have done ship miniatures in the past. And, you know, the truth is sails and all the rigging is pretty complex, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure that Blue Bolt did simulate those things when they needed to, but it's great to have that sort of practical real world reference, even if it's not used fully, but of course it seems to have been implemented into the final shots. I would also say one thing here worth mentioning, Hugo, is the scanning of at least one of the boats, one of the ships, which is, I think, the Victory in Portsmouth. You know, you can go and visit the Victory right now. I'm sure, I think I've done it when I was like 10 years old. And a significant scanning effort occurred with that ship, as well as a million other things in the film. I think I'll talk more about this when we get to the Waterloo battle.
Yeah.
But there's an amazing scanning, surveying asset company in England called Visual Skies, which do a lot of this stuff. And they did a really awesome job, especially with that Victory ship. You can actually go to Visual Skies website. I'll give everyone the link in the show notes, and like look at the 3D scan that they did for this ship. It's kind of cool.
Oh, that's cool.
And some other assets they scanned for the film too. But this is part of also generally, Hugo, that discussion about how much visual effects is part of the film. Well, you know, they're scanning everything because they need to. And so look, I don't want to harp on this thing about practical and real, but it's so bizarre in a way that some filmmakers don't talk about the CG stuff because they've got these scanning companies involved from day one doing stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, they get animatics all the time and they get like pre-renders all the time. They are completely involved from start to finish. No one is going to believe and tell me that Ridley was not heavily involved on all of that. Of course he was. I sometimes also think, I don't want to go back to that conversation, but really quickly just say, I also sometimes think that, because I've witnessed this, sometimes they do mention it on the interviews, but it doesn't get picked up. I think that's also the case, because they are doing the full interview, and because it's not flavor of the month, no one cares about those things. They only want to talk about the real stuff. Sometimes directors do mention CG, but it doesn't get to the edit. It gets cut out of the interviews. And so that happens a lot. Or sometimes the studio intervenes and massages the interviews to be said on a certain way to push a certain agenda or certain thing regarding the film. But we've talked about that. I don't want to go into that conversation again.
Anyway.
But that battle, really, like all the other battles on the film, it really testament to how it was shot. Like really big shout out to Dariusz Wolski, the DOP of the film, and all their team of cameramen, because we know there are like 14 cameras sometimes on some shots of this film, and this is a really big effort to try to film something like this with 14 cameras, because obviously then you have to clean them up because they're going to show up all over the place. Yeah. Although, as I heard, the cameramans were dressed appropriate to the age, to the time, so that they could get away with some of it, so they could maybe get away with sometimes just having to remove the camera only. But it really showcases how the film was shot. Film as much as possible for real, shoot it as much as you can with practical effects and cannons and powder and all of it. Then, of course, large sections of it will be replaced anyway. So sometimes you see the raw plates and you see the crew there, and you see even the parking lot. Sometimes you even see the vans of the shoot. That's fine because they know they're going to replace it all. But it grounds the shot, because even if you're just using 10% of it, the shot itself gives a lot of information for the VFX department, because they have the lens that was shot, they have the chromatic aberration, they have the vignetting of that lens, they have the f-stop, the shutter speed, the ISO, all those informations or something they don't have to do. They don't have to care about that, because it's really hard to do a full CG shot. You have to come up with things, and this way, because you're grounding them in every shot, even if you're just using 10% of it is shot for real, at least you don't have to think about those things. You just follow the shot.
Yeah.
You follow the plate, and you will end up with something real because you follow the rules of that plate, and the movement of that camera.
Yeah. It's yes, Ridley Scott films are probably the ultimate visual effects plate to final films in a way. You know, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And I bet, gosh, that must be so hard, and we'll get to these battles, to, like have real world stunties in there and horses, and then all that rotoscoping and plate prep to make it happen.
And you notice one really quick thing, which is I was shocked. My jaw was to the floor. The film was shot in 62 days.
Yeah.
That's only 2 months. Like, how the hell was this shot in 2 months?
Yeah. How does he do it?
14 cameras, that's how you do it.
Yes, and probably an experienced team that's been on with him doing these things for a while now. So, yeah,
absolutely.
Let's start talking about the battles. One of them is the Battle of Austerlitz. I probably mispronounced that, but you didn't.
You did a really good job there.
This one is characterized, of course, by the fact that it's on ice.
Yeah.
And beautifully shot. You can see in ILM's incredible breakdown. So they were responsible for most of this sequence. That they had some amazing plates, as we were just saying, to work with. And there's an interesting tidbit, isn't there, at the beginning of that breakdown, Hugo, I think, where they have some cannons up on the hill. And I think in my story, Charlie mentioned that basically the cannons were molded and like real world looking, but they were made to fire talcum powder, which I think is fascinating. Of course, because you don't want to injure people around them and in front of them. And so then ILM had to simulate the cannon fire, as well as the cannonballs.
And the hit as well, the bounce as well.
Yeah. So that's just one aspect of the sequence, of course. I found the cannonball discussion interesting with Charlie, in that he's saying, well, maybe if we think about it too hard, the cannonballs, they're going so fast, you wouldn't even be able to see them even with, even as motion blurred balls. But they did some research and said they didn't actually go that fast all the time.
So
there was a feeling that we could actually show them and match them up to mortar hits in the ground, for the different battles. I thought that was interesting because, they're always looking for excuses for what to show on screen, and that was a good one.
Absolutely. No, that breakdown is amazing, and they had. Apparently, they still had 14 cannons on set, which is quite a lot. I was on set once doing a commercial. We had 5 cannons on set, and that was already a really complicated work. And we ended up having a lot of problems trying to even rig them, even actually to fire anything. It's really difficult. So props from them, because they did shoot them for real, the ones on the foreground at least. But man, this sequence is really impressive because it was shot in 3 different locations. You see that on the breakdown, that they have the forest, and then they have an airfield, and then they have another place, which I can remember the name of it, all merged together really seamlessly. You don't even notice. And it's so funny that sometimes on some shots, they only have a little piece of snow in the corner with like a horse, and then the whole thing is replaced. The whole shot is replaced. And of course, there's a 4th location, which is Pinewood, with the underwater sequences as well, like the underwater deaths and the all the people falling in the ice. But this is where the film really grows. This is these are the shots, really. These are the shots. You're talking about like hundreds of thousands of soldiers, thousands and thousands of horses, all at the same time. according to the breakdown of Visual Effects Society for simulations, because they are nominated for best simulation on a motion picture, they had 2,000 horses on this shot, CG horses, and they had 20,000 soldiers on the simulations. So this is like monumental amount of rendering happening here.
Actually, I wanted to bring this up in particular. Crowds in visual effects. You know, since Lord of the Rings, crowds have been an incredible thing. And with using different tools, Massive and Golem and Houdini-driven tools, they haven't been a huge discussion, in my opinion, in the past couple of films. Definitely, DNEG utilised them in June pretty well, crowds. But here, I just want to make sure that the ILM artists get a lot of recognition for their crowds work, and basically not just doing the crowd simulation and animation, but matching it to real world soldiers and horses.
Yeah.
There's some incredible ragdoll sims going on with the crowds, you know, when they're getting hit or falling into the ice and water. But basically, unless you were shown in the breakdown, I don't think you'd be able to tell who's who.
No, at all.
That's a really impressive thing with a crowd, because sometimes crowd work can look exactly what it might just be, which is mocap fixed to, you know, agents and CG assets. But here I thought it was very naturalistic, and that was a big props to ILM there.
And it's funny how things evolved, isn't it? Because if you look back at Gladiator, like also from Ridley Scott, where they, you know, famously The Mill did those visual effects and won the Oscar, and the crowds were made by shooting multiple hundred stuntmen and people on green screens and then compositing them one by one on the crowd stadiums,
in the
famously
stadium,
using flame, which was insane by then, but that's how The Mill used to roll. And it's really funny how things have evolved. Like, we used to do them, like, you know, on green screen, we would shoot person by person doing things and moving around their arms and everything, and then fill up the stadium on the Gladiator, the Coliseum. And now it's this elaborate, super complex system process, which I don't think many people understand. They did had 100. The whole thing is based on, as I understood from the breakdown from the Visual Effects Society. Props for them to putting it there. It all comes from 700 infantry scans. So they scanned 700 different soldiers on costume, of course. So that's already a big undertaking to scan 700 people. It's a lot. And then you scan 100 horses as well. So you have 100 horses that are being scanned as well, all with different heights and different sizes and different colors. And then from that 100 horses, then you recreate 2,000 horses by doing several tweaks to them. And then from the 700 people, you then create 20,000 people by tweaking and alterating them and changing them ever so slightly. And that's why it works, because the people that were on set are those people that were scanned, so they are very similar to the scans, and then you apply that into this kind of high-scale simulation and crowd simulation, and it just merges so well. The amazing work on display on this shot is just stunning, and we're just talking about the stunt, like the crowd. You have then ice breaking, you have which is matched to the mortar, the air mortars that were there. You then have styrofoam that is there on the set for the soldiers to grab on, pretending that there are pieces of the ice. That styrofoam needs to be completely replaced by ice and have actually flocks of ice on top. When they famously, there's these shots with them on the hands scrubbing through the ice. That's all simulation. Then you have the water, which is shot on pine wood, but then completely replaced and a brand new simulation. Top of that, you have the blood, which is also the blood simulation of the soldiers dying in the water and then having this enormous amount of blood that is art directed to fill up the pool. And then on top of that, you have snow, and then you have wind. And we're not even talking about all the tents, all the CG tents that are on the back, all the flags, all the actual the practical sets that they've built with 2 or 3 tents, and then they've replicated hundreds of other tents, and also the floor as well. This is like, these shots that we're seeing on ILM's breakdown, this is like some of the most complex CG you're gonna get. Like this is like next level shit, you know. It's really complex.
Yeah, and
it's really complex.
And it's just one of the battles in the film. So I think that's what's really cool. But it is an example, as you've already mentioned, of a really, really good collaboration, you know, with obviously what could be filmed, and then with Neil Corbold's team and Keith Dawson. Apparently, he supervised the Pinewood shoot for special effects. And I think I do wonder what it must have been like for like a stunty or an extra or a double to be part of, you know, the shoot for this, because it mustn't have felt like it was going to be a very compelling battle. So then whatever, you know, has been added here by ILM is just so fantastic in terms of filling out the you know, the visceral nature of the battle, basically. Because at some point, as an audience member, I was like really feeling sorry, of course, for these soldiers fleeing into the ice and falling into the water. So something worked right in this editorial, you know, in the editorial side of this battle, because I was feeling that emotion while they were going under.
Yeah, well, like, definitely feel it, because it's quite dramatic, actually, because it keeps growing and growing and growing, and then you end up with all these people drowning. Well, famously, like 20,000 people drown on this battle, on this ice. Although there are some historical inaccuracies, of course. It's not all supposed to be like that, and it's all a bit... has been criticized because the film shows it in a very quick way, and it was not really this quick. It was like dragging for days, and it was not this. It wasn't like this. It wasn't. This is an action-packed version of it. It's like a condensed version of.
It's a movie, Hugo.
I know it's a movie. I know it's a movie. I'm not complaining about that. I think it's really well made, and the fact that I just can't. Here's the thing. It really fooled me. Okay, and I'm an experienced VFX supervisor. I watched the film on the first time. Didn't watch it on the cinema because it wasn't on the cinema, but I did watch it in 4K. I watched it in 4K on the screener from Visual Effects Society on my projector. So I think I got a good look at it in 4K in a big 2-meter wide screen. And I was fooled. Like, I wasn't really sure what was CG, was not. Like, I kind of watched the whole thing, and I was like, oh my God, like they kind of exploded people, and they did this and that. I understood that on the wides, it would have been CG. I thought that immediately, of course. Oh, yeah, that wide is CG, of course. And there are quite a lot of shots, especially on the end section when they are on the ice and you start to have all the mortars falling down and especially have this one dude on the horse going. A lot of those shots are full CG. Like, they don't even have a plate. Well, they had a plate, but then it's replaced and there's nothing left on the plate. So that fooled me because it's mixed with all the other action, so you don't even notice. But it's only when I saw the breakdown that I really started to understand that every shot has CG. Every shot has an enormous extension, and a lot of times Joaquin Phoenix is like next with his horse next to 5 dudes. And there's only like 5 people there. And he's like ordering them around, and then you notice that there's like another 10,000 added behind them. So it's really a testament to ILM's team here and the supervision's team. They fooled me, and I thought that they did a remarkable job merging what I thought was like shot, a lot of it practical, and I guess it fooled a lot of people. And man, this is the perfect kind of thing the Oscar loves. Like, but the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more I think they have a big chance of winning, because this is really like outstanding work, you know.
Well, Hugo, that ice battle is only one battle in the film. Of course, the centerpiece one is Waterloo. And
Waterloo!
I thought they did a good job with the different locations and battles in general as a movie watcher, in going, well, how do we show this differently? Of course, it's a different location, it's a different battle, but they did a good job of like making that, you know, a very distinctive thing. In this battle, it's a similar approach. Go out and film it. Use Neil Corbold's special effects team to do smoke, mortar hits, cannon hits, use stunties, use horses, use 14 cameras, as we've mentioned. I really can't say much more about the staging of the battle. Apparently, what's interesting is Charlie Henley told me that they didn't really previs it. Instead, of course, Ridley Scott draws these ridiculous storyboards. He's very well known for having these things called Ridleygrams, which are detailed sketches or boards. But I think I can understand why they didn't necessarily need to previs this. Everyone knows what the idea is. Two crazy, armies coming together, slowly staging one of these battles as they were in the day. They were menacing and crazy during the actual fighting, but a lot of it was about staging, right? Staging the armies. So I think in some ways it was quite obvious what needed to happen in terms of the final shots. But generally, I mean, surely this battle blew you away as well, Hugo.
By this time, I was already blown away by the film anyway, so it kind of felt like a bit soft already because I was so used to it. I think you're so into the battles already that you don't even realize. I didn't realize how much it was until I saw the breakdown. By that time, I guess I lost a bit sensitivity already because I was so used to the whole thing. And only when I saw the NPC breakdown, I saw, oh, damn, this is even more than the other one.
Yeah.
Because this one is not. I'm not. Man, I don't want anyone to be think that I'm disrespecting the other one because it has snow and wind and it's very dark and very muddy. I guess you can probably get away with some of it. You probably can't. I'm not saying they did. They did not do that at all. But there's a lot of murk on the top of the shot. This one is wide open, sunny after the rain, of course. Sunny, open fields, and you have to do all of that. And on some shots you have, 100 stuntmen and 10, 20 horses, which is already a lot. It's a lot of people to organize and a lot of people to shoot, to have hundreds of people on the stage, on the set. But then they extend 10,000 people behind them. This is a next level extension thing going on here. And I think this shot, this one is even more impressive. And not to mention that they also did an amazing job with particulars of the battle, the way that they staged the squares when they were all the soldiers were next to it and then the horses going around and all those things that were really, really trickily hand animated with the horses falling down and all the gore and all the blood and then all the mortars. It's really well staged and really well constructed. And you really truly believe that someone was hit because there are stuntmen flying around on the air, getting hit by air mortars, but then being augmented so much by NPC that it feels really dangerous. Doesn't it? Doesn't it feel really dangerous when you're watching it?
It feels really dangerous, and I think again to harp on about the collaboration here, it's shooting a battle, getting what you can get with 14 cameras, but then as Charlie Henley mentioned to me, they've got literally a VFX director of photography and an on-set soup in the battle, capturing reference for lighting, capturing, the plates. Basically, they're very much involved in getting the right, data that they need during this battle, during the shooting, so that they can replicate it later on with digital soldiers, digital horses, whatnot. I definitely feel like the danger came from actually shooting what they could shoot and then replicating it with as real as possible, digital humans, digital horses, digital explosions, whatnot. But then mixing that with the practical. Hugo, we mentioned the cannons in the ice battle. They, of course, have another 14 on set here and do some really great simulations for the actual cannon fire, including, matching what was done on set. But on set, it's likely to have been some sort of talcum powder or, some black powder shot in a safe way. But
I'm
here
assuming
NPC
they did
has
it
done
the
amazing
same
thing.
way. Yeah, I'm assuming they did the same technique for both staging,
Yeah.
although it's ILM and MPC doing the VFX, but I'm assuming the rigging on set was the same for both because, man, this is a 2-month shoot. They probably didn't come up with something new. They probably did it back to back, but
Yeah.
but which is testament to, again, amazing supervision, because I cannot tell any difference between the cannons of ILM and the cannons of MPC or the explosions. They look exactly the same,
Yes.
and they,
There's some-
which is really good.
It's all very consistent in this film too, which I think is an important point to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
In this battle in particular, I really loved the. It's going to sound weird, but the slowness of it as well. We're talking about how intense it is, but there's some nice aerial shots. You were sort of talking about that already with the staging. When you watch the breakdown from MPC, it's really like fun to like go through it slowly, especially those high shots, to see what's been kept in the plate, what's real, and then to try and go, oh my God, the artist that had to roto this area or body track or match move and do all this stuff. Like there's almost an artistic way of looking at this battle from a visual effects breakdown point of view. And that's kind of almost one reason why I really love it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shots where they had to remove rigs of soldiers, remove mortars, remove cameramans, and then add on top all the extra dust and particles that would have been like a mixture of what was on the plate, and then also some of it on CG and some of it on elements. It's really remarkable work. It's thousand. I couldn't find the count for the entire production, but I'm assuming it's like 2,000 or 3,000 shots on this film, visual effects. I don't have a count.
Yeah, I don't have a count either, but it's got to be.
Sounds got to be, because it's like just this battle alone has hundreds and hundreds of shots that you described. The ones that you just are painting and rotoing, really detailed, really artistic, detailed. Next, like really, really, really tiny things, because these are massive plates. As they've mentioned, these are massive 4K scans that they are compositing on top, and from several angles as well, which becomes a huge problem for supervision, because they have to shoot multiple HDRs and multiple references, and then also gather all the data from all these lenses, all these cameras, all the camera heights. I don't even imagine how much work got into that. Of you just,
oh my God,
like making a record of what was happening. Like it's just like keeping a record of all the heights and all the angles and all the lenses of everything's going on.
Yeah, and as you mentioned already as well, we talked about scanning. I mean, they're scanning weapons, and asset management of that is crazy. Apparently, one thing that was really interesting, again, a nice historical accuracy, apparently in a mix of inaccuracies, Hugo, that you've identified, is that many of the soldiers, they weren't really given a uniform. They sort of brought their own trousers or their own whatever. So, you would think from a visual effects point of view, oh, this is going to be okay. We can model, some clothing and just change it a little bit for each soldier. Well, no. The whole point is that they basically wore very different things, especially in this Battle of Waterloo. So costumers had to make that happen on set, but also the scanning and then visual effects teams had to make that happen. I actually think subconsciously that's why it looks so real, because it doesn't look standardized. Like I was saying with some of those crowd simulations can sometimes look a bit standardized. And there was something about the mix of colors and costumes and whatnot here that made it look a bit more real.
Yeah, and it's testament to the custom design team, which are nominated to the Oscar as well. And surely, normally period films win this Oscar, and I do think that they have a big shot of winning. And it's for me that Oscar is going to definitely be a huge boost for the collaboration that happened here, because the costume design team did an amazing job, but then the CG had to replicate and tweak and manufacture thousands of variations from those first costumes. So we're talking almost like about, this is in a way costume design, but it's also CG costume design that we're talking about. So although I know the Oscar is only talking about the physical costumes, but there is so much digital costume design happening on this project as well, which is going to be fascinating if they win the Oscar, because I feel like it props for them as well, for the digital team, because they did an amazing job there as well, recreating all these things. I mean, I said this in the beginning. The film is filled with, I don't like the film, and there's a lot of things that I really, really, really hate on the film, but the visual effects are just like absolutely next level. And I just feel that this film is really well made. I mean, yeah, everyone just brought their A game. It's just so well constructed. There's really no shots that look bad, and there's really no, you always have like the stinkers on the production. There's always like, oh, this shot doesn't look good, oh, that shot. It's so consistent. The whole thing is so consistent, which is really, really very rare these days, especially when you have so many companies involved on a production like this,
Absolutely. And the other thing is, we've only really talked about the huge sequences, the beginning, the ice battle and Battle of Waterloo. This is a film that I think also suits a visual effects Oscar winner by having a bunch of invisible visual effects as well. Yeah. One of the things that I think will be a talking point in the next couple of weeks is the candle lights. That was basically done by using some LED candles with bulbs that were small like a flame, but also matched the right color spectrum, I think, or light spectrum of real candles. Yeah. And then there's about 1,200 replacements done by Visual Effects Studio PFX. That's just awesome invisible effects work, which I think is, spotted throughout the film, obviously, and there's others as well, right?
Yeah, there are. That's the thing. Like, there's this enormous amount of shots that have nothing to do with the battles, and they have nothing to do with the visual effects type of shots, which by themselves already would probably be an enormous amount of work that would already be a great contender for nomination anyway, because it's you're talking about the candles. Yes, that is stunning work and really smart as well, because it's such a fire hazard to have so many candles. You can't really do it like Kubrick used to do with Barry Lyndon, where he had real candles on the set. It's really dangerous to do those kind of things anymore right now. But then also, let's just, now I guess we're winding down on the podcast now, of course, because we're going to wrap up. But let's just talk about all the other stuff, okay? You talked about the candles, but then you have a lot of CG birds. There's so many CG birds on
Seagulls,
this. Pigeons. Then you have
crap.
Bird droppings, bunch of bird droppings which are simulated and tracked and comped.
I like that.
Especially when he's like sitting on the throne in Moscow, there's like droppings coming out of the ceiling. Like think about it. There's like an entire CG team and compositing team that had to do the bird droppings.
Yeah.
And then you have, of course, Cold Breath, all of it. And this is like not like Titanic. It's next level. There are hundreds of people on the set. So it's a lot more like you have Cold Breath. Then you have, of course, ice, snow, rain on a lot of shots, especially shots outside the battle as well. You even have like the Forge. Even that was like a really cool thing. Like this, like they shot it practical with some LED lights, but then they did this miniature for the mold of the metal, which is really awesome, made of honey and coffee grinds and luminous powder to make this kind of really luminescence, like molten lava going through the thing on a miniature. It's awesome work there.
I thought that was cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yes, go for it.
Animals, you've mentioned birds, there's dogs that needed to piss, like which is a really cool thing that Charlie says in the breakdown. Yes, and gosh, we didn't even mention Moscow, but that's an example really of incredible visual effects where they shot it at a very, famous, isn't it, location in Britain.
Yeah, they filmed it on Blenheim Palace.
Yeah.
That was the last thing I was going to mention. There's this enormous amount of set extension and set design and compositing and CG takeovers, because I don't know if people realize they did not shoot in France at all. The whole thing was shot in Britain.
No.
The whole shot was shot in Britain. So they shot it on Lincoln Cathedral. They shot it on Blenheim Palace. They shot it on the Lincoln Cathedral that was like basically making up for being Notre Dame. And there's like also like Stowe House. There's Buckinghamshire. There's West Wycombe. There's like so much of it is basically British palaces and mansions that are being shot for real and then repurposed and replaced in CG or basically augmented to make it look like that they are Versailles, or to make it look like that they are French. And that alone is amazing work. You know?
And of course, the as you've already mentioned, it has the effect of it feels real because they did go and shoot it somewhere, even if they've augmented it. And, you know, that also goes for using Malta for Egypt for a couple of scenes where he's at the Sphinx and the pyramids. And, I mean, I feel like Ridley Scott lives in Malta, you know, with so many of his films, when you need a dusty, crazy environment like that.
He is known for using the same locations. Like, I mean, famously, there's the first battle, the forest is the same forest he used in Gladiator.
Yeah.
So it's like, I guess he likes his locations.
Yeah.
No, but you see, Ian, that alone, that thing of converting British palaces to French palaces, that alone is a really outstanding part of the breakdown. If you start looking at the breakdown of, in this case, some of it is most of it is on an MPC reel. There are like shots there where sometimes they had blue screen, but sometimes they didn't. Sometimes there was no blue screen, and they had the entire building, and they kept sections of it and then added other parts to it and added tops, both the Kremlin and also French locations. And it's really smart. It's really smart because you shoot something, the actors are there, and they feel something because they're there and they feel that they are on a really beautiful, lush location. And they will, of course, give the best, instead of going to a green screen or to an LED stage. I feel like it's fast. Yeah, that's actually, I just realized that now. It's fascinating how this film does not have LED stages. The whole film, to my knowledge, there's nothing like that on the film whatsoever.
It's almost too grand for that sort of thing in some ways. You know, in its epic nature and in its shot design as well. But yeah, the breakdowns that you see from MPC's reel of like, oh, they could have just used that background of that building and maybe we're none the wiser. But by just extending it and augmenting it in the right way, you know, they just create a stunning shot, you know, of French palaces and French locations.
And they had a lot of people involved, like architects and historians, to try to get it as close as possible to what it was, which is in a way, it's really strange because when you look at the VFX and the breakdowns and you look at this work, it's all very accurate and all very much driven by consultants and historians and records and paintings, and then they do a perfect match. But then this is what I don't really comprehend on this film, because there's this effort being done for the battles and the VFX and for everything to look exactly as it should from the 18th century paintings and records that they have. But then there are major sections of the film that are just invented or just didn't happen that way. So it is like there's a lot of like disconnect on that sense, because the shots are very real and everything is matching that era, but then some of the events are completely staged and completely invented. And I know you mentioned this before. Oh, this is a movie. You go, I know what you mean. It is a movie. I know that, but it's just I just find it fascinating how you have a film that is supposed to be constructed on this ground level, so realistic, and you have so many people involved, making sure everything, making sure the palace on the back isn't the Stowe House on Buckinghamshire, and it looks like Versailles instead. And there's a lot of people researching to make it meticulously matching. But then then there's like an entire scene where you have like Wellington meeting Napoleon. That never happened. Or you have like Marie Antoinette being executed and Napoleon watching it, but he wasn't there. He was somewhere else. He was on another city. There's all sorts of like. He shoots cannons to the pyramids, but that didn't happen either. So there's all sorts of these things, this disconnect of very realistic things that were done to make it look like the film is really grounded in history, but then there's just like invented events on the middle of it. I just find it fascinating.
Well, I can't defend it. I don't know enough about it. I would love our history buff viewers to either say, yes, Hugo, that's crazy, or here's where there's a suggestion that maybe he did fire a cannonball at the pyramids.
Have you seen what he said on the interview when someone asked him about that, about the pyramids? So Ridley, this interview is real, man. I saw it. So someone asked, says Ridley Scott, oh, but Napoleon never fired to the pyramids. His answer was, were you there? You don't know. Like, it is so funny. It's such a British thing to say. It's so funny.
I've got to say, I've got to agree with him there.
I know. It's so funny, isn't it? Like, he was but yeah, he later on, he was joking, of course. He later on said, and I do agree with him, he said that he couldn't spend more time on that shot. He just wanted to make a point that he took Egypt. And so that's the best way of describing he took Egypt. That's how you take Egypt. You blast the pyramid with a cannon. You took Egypt.
Well,
but yeah, I didn't mean to like go on a tangent there. But I just to go back to track, like I do think just that section of VFX, the Egypt VFX and the real miniature, like the buildings that were extended, the forge, the LED candles, the ice, the cold, the snow, the birds, the dogs. Just that alone, if that existed as just that, if the film only had that, imagine the film had no battles and it only had those VFX, which are probably thousands of shots. That alone would be considered a very big VFX production, already. It is quite impressive how much of that exists there as well on the film.
Oh, I love that invisible stuff. And there's some great period TV shows, The Great and a few others that have that kind of invisible work in it too. But here, I feel like Charlie and NPC and the other vendors just took it up a notch.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I love that work. I think based on your rant about the cannons against the pyramids and a few other things, we probably should wrap it up. It's been a lot of fun diving into the film, a huge visual effects film, obviously Oscar nominated. Can't wait to see the result. But Hugo, thank you for going through that with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man. And thanks all to everyone watching, and don't forget to leave some comments. And thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See you later. Bye.